All right, hello. My name is Marcos, artist name Young Eldon, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make your first song. This video is directed at people who have no clue about what they're doing relating to music, theory-wise, program-wise. This video is essentially directed towards people who have no prior experience. It's obviously better if you do, but if you have no prior experience, you should still be fine. If you've, wanted to make music for a while, maybe you thought you weren't talented enough, maybe you thought you didn't have what it takes, well, you're objectively wrong. So we're gonna get into it now. The first half of this video is going to be music theory, and the second half is going to be about the actual process of the beat making. So I'm gonna tell you from now, this is gonna be a long video, but I'm gonna put some timestamps and I'm gonna, separate it nicely so that if you already know some things, you can kind of jump in from there. If you don't know anything, you can just start from the beginning. And if maybe you know music theory, you can jump from the beat making part. You don't really have to watch it all the way through. I hope you do though, and I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, we're gonna get started with the music theory part. All right, today we're gonna be talking a little bit about some surface level music theory. If you don't know anything about music theory, it might seem pretty complicated. It's really not that bad. Even then, what you need to get started is absolutely minimal. But I would advise you get better at it. Learn as much as you can on your own time because it'll eventually be an incredible tool for you to express yourself. If you really have a grasp on it, you'll be able to do whatever the hell you want. You can be a really good producer and barely know music theory, just like you can be kind of a weak producer and know a lot of music theory. All I'm trying to say is music theory is a tool. It slaps. To start, we're going to talk about notes. Now, notes are universal. Doesn't matter what instrument you're using. A piano, from beginning to end, it has a certain pattern to it. There's always one white key, then there's a black key, white key, black key. Actually, what am I doing? I'm going to draw it. Wait, what am I doing? I have an example up here. What's wrong with me? So if you're looking at the piano notes, at the piano keys, you're going to notice that there's a pattern from beginning to end. I'm going to name the notes now. Starting from middle C, which is the middlemost key, there's a pattern up and down that you're going to notice. From beginning to end, the names of the notes are C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, and then B. You'll see that after B, the pattern starts again, and it'll be starting again with C. This pattern will go up and down the piano. Each grouping from C to B before it starts again at the next C, that's an octave. The notes are going to be the same regardless of the octave you're on. They'll just sound higher pitched or lower pitched. A lot of people, when they're starting out, what they'll do is they'll label an octave so they can start getting familiar with which note is where. If that helps you, I suggest you do it. All I recommend is that you start getting familiar with this. Start getting familiar with the way notes are laid out so that you don't really have to think about it too much. Press your finger down and you already know which note you're playing just off of looking at it for a second. So that's notes. So now we're going to talk about scales. Now, there's a lot of scales. There's actually there's far more than just one scale, and that's for each individual note. So I'm going to explain real quick. Scales or keys, it's just a grouping of notes. It's just an assortment of notes that you play together because they sound cool. There's different types of scales. There's major scales. For this video and for the song, we're going to be using the scale of C major. C major scale is comprised of C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. These are all the white keys on the keyboard. It doesn't matter where I'm playing this on the keyboard, as long as it's this group of notes, I'm playing C major. It'll be C major wherever I play it. Now remember, I'm saying major. There's major scales, there's minor scales, there's a ridiculous amount of scales. So again, these are the notes in C major. You can make a major scale out of any one of the keys on the keyboard, even the black keys. For major scales, the formula is specifically... To apply this formula to find the scale, we're going to start on any note. We can do that with any note in the entire piano and build a scale off of it. A major scale. The formula is different for a minor scale. So with C, it goes C, 2 semitones, D, 2 semitones, E, 1 semitone to F, 2 semitones to G, 2 semitones to A, 2 semitones to B, and then 1 semitone to reach C again, which would be the beginning of the scale again, which would be your first octave. Let's say you want to start with a minor scale. So I'm going to give you an example before we move on to chords. I'm going to show you the scale of A minor. The reason I chose A minor, and I'm going to write the notes down right here real quick. That looks pretty ugly near the end. The reason I chose A minor, they're the exact same notes as C major, even though A minor is a minor scale. Why is this? A minor is the relative minor of C major, a scale that has the exact same notes as that scale that it is the relative minor of. However, you're going to notice that it starts from a different point. The order of the notes in the scale matters a lot. Depending on the order with which you play these notes, a melody will come out a lot different. There's a lot of movements inside of these scales that you can make to create some deliberate tension, release, emotion. I'm going to show you the formula of the minor scale. We're going to be using numbers, and we're going to be using the whole or half formula as well. So starting in any note of all the notes that there are, you can make a minor scale by making movements. 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, or whole, half, whole, half, whole. So we have 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, and whole, half, half, whole. You can build a minor scale with this. And again, I chose A minor because it is the exact same notes of C major, but starting at a different point and obviously ending at a different point again, which would be A. I just now realized that I left this A in for no reason at all. So we've covered notes, scales, major scales and minor scales, you know, what a whole step is, what a half step is, C major, A minor, you know, give you a little bit of work with. Now we're going to talk about chords. Chords slap. Chords absolutely slap. Chords are essentially built on harmony. Kind of oversimplifying, but harmony is essentially two notes being played simultaneously or more. I'm going to give an example. C and E. That'd be two notes. Could be G, B. Could be, I don't know, B and F sharp. It's really up to you. We're going to get into a basic explanation of chords. Now, chords can range from very simple to very complex, but since we're getting started, I'm going to explain to you some simple chords that you should know and ones that relate to our scale. So we're going to go back to C major. So here we have C major. We're going to talk about the major chord. There's a chord for each note in the scale. To be real, there's far more than one chord per note overall. Like there's C major, there's C minor, there's C diminished, C augmented. There's a lot of different types of chords, but again, we're only going to be talking about major chords. We got major chords and minor chords. They both have different formulas. They both have different sounds. A lot of people like to say major chords sound happy, open. A lot of people like to say minor chords sound sad and dark, but that's really situational. So we're going to make the first chord of the scale, which is going to be C major. C major is these three notes, C, E, and G. We're going to be using the first note, the third note, and the fifth note. It's C, E, G. There's going to be one chord or one type of chord per each note. And the reason that there's like these types of Roman numerals and these ones, it's because when they look like this, it means that they're a major chord. And if it looks like this, it's a minor chord. With the exception of the last one, this is a diminished chord. It means it's a different kind of chord from the rest of them. So we're going to ignore the seventh there. If you like the way it sounds, play it in your song. Back to C major. If you want to look at this from a really simplistic way, kind of an easier way if you're getting into it, within a scale, you're going to do notes, ignore this note, notes, ignore this note, and then notes, giving us C, E, G. And now if you listen to the way C, E, G sounds, it's kind of happy. It is the first chord of your entire scale. Now, this formula where you kind of pick a note, skip a note, pick a note, skip a note, and pick a note can be applied to any of these. And you can even go further. Now, a lot like I gave you scale formulas, we're going to give you chord formulas so that it doesn't matter where you are on the keyboard. You can make a chord out of anything. So for major chords, starting from the first note, you're going to travel 4, 3. You'll notice that I'm not really using whole notes or half notes now. It's because this goes beyond just 1 and 2, and these things have specific names like major third, minor third. This is the spacing that you're going to have between the notes when you're dealing with a major chord. If you were starting from C, you would go 1, which is up to C sharp, or the little black note above C, 2, which is down to D, 3, which is up to D sharp, which is a little black note above D, into E. That's the gap between your first note and your second note. It's a 4 semitones. The next step you're going to take is 3 semitones. 3 semitones, I apologize. So from E, you're going to go F, which is 1, F sharp, which is your second step, and G, which is going to be your third step. That's what you're going to be landing on. So now you've essentially built a major triad. Now, for minor triads, it's this exact same thing, but reversed. So our example is going to be D minor, which is the second chord in C major. You would go from D. All right, so the way I explained this part didn't really make any sense, so I'm just gonna edit this in. Starting at D, we would go up one semitone to D sharp, up another semitone to E, up a third semitone to F, that's the 3, and then from F, one semitone to F sharp, 2 semitones to G, 3 semitones to G sharp, and then 4 semitones to A. So the chord would be D minor. So we have major triads, which are signified by these Roman numerals, and minor triads. I've talked about triads so far. Triads are just 3 notes together, but if you want to spice things up, you're going to go higher than that. So we're going to talk about a major 7th and a minor 7th, and that'll be the last one, I promise. So we're going to use C major 7th, and we're going to use D minor 7th. So this is the proper way to write it. So you have C major 7, and you're going to notice that if you start researching on your own time online, oftentimes this will stay exactly the same, but sometimes they'll write this as M7. It'll mean the exact same thing. I'm going to write the formulas down now, and we're going to start with C major. So I wrote C minor 7th, D minor 7th, D minor 7th. We have C, we have E, we have G, and we have B. A lot like earlier, it would start 4, 3, and then you would have another 4. So 4 semitones up from C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. From E, you would go F, F sharp, G. And then from G, you would go G sharp, A sharp, and B. And so you have your C major 7th chord. When we're talking about minor chords, the formula would be 3, 4, 3. Using this starting on any notes on the entire keyboard, not even in your scale. All right, so what I meant to say in that section was that if you use these previously mentioned formulas, on any note of the piano, you will essentially get the corresponding chord. So if I use the major 7th formula on the E on the piano, I get an E major 7th chord, which would be starting from E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so comprised of the notes E, G sharp, B, and D sharp, we have the E major 7th chord. All right, so we have one thing left to talk about for this video, and it's the subject of inversions. So an inversion is essentially when you have a chord and you change it from its root position. Now, I'm gonna explain to you what a root position is. So we're gonna use the example of the C major triad that we talked about before. So we call this the root position because essentially it's in its most base form, with its root note at the bottom. So C is the root note of the C major chord. In the first inversion, you essentially shift up the root note an entire octave. You would essentially just have E, G, C. It's this, but I moved this up to the front, so now it's like this. I'm gonna see if I can put a visual up of what that looks and sounds like. And then additionally, there's the second inversion. A way that this is often described is that the first inversion is the most stable. The second one is a little unstable, and then this one's pretty unstable. So the reason I'm explaining inversions and what they are is because this is where you can really like sort of give it your personal touch. If you're working chords into a song, it's one thing to work all of them in their root position, but it's another thing to work inversions in and sort of switch notes around. You can do this even beyond just triads. I'm using triads just so you get a good idea of it. So you could sort of start adding this into other things. If you had a C major 7th chord, which is just C, G, E, and what's wrong with me? What the So if you had a C major 7th chord, you could essentially move this note to the front. It would be right next to the B. It might sound a little dissonant. You can move the E to the front, G to the front. It really depends on what the sound you're looking for and what you think sounds best for the situation. So the most important thing when it comes to inversions is to experiment and find the ones you like, because again, there's no right, there's no wrong way. You just kind of feel for it. Additionally, you can get really creative by inserting and removing notes. Now, we talked about a triad, which is a chord composed of 3 notes. We talked about a 7th chord, which is a chord composed of 4 notes. And then there's extensions. Extensions are essentially extending beyond the 7th chord. So if this is C major 7th, this would be beyond the 7th. This would be the 1st degree of the scale, the 3rd degree of the scale, the 5th degree, the 7th, and then the 9th. I'm choosing the right numbers this time so it's a little simpler for you to understand. Now that we've injected a D in there, we have a C major 9th chord. There's also C major 11 chords, C major 13. Those are a little advanced. You can still kind of remove notes from this if you think it'll sound better. You can just go to E, G, D. You could just get rid of this one. That might sound kind of weird, but who cares? If it sounds good to you, that's all that matters. It's really important that you learn things like inversions, start learning your chords and scales and even extensions, so that not only do you learn the basics, you start learning what you like the most, and you can start sort of adding your own flavor to things. Forgot to record this part before I recorded the rest of the video, so it's gonna sound a little different. I have a different mic and everything. You only need 3 things to get started making music in your own bedroom. First, you need a computer. A computer doesn't have to be an amazing computer. It can be a laptop. It can be a crappy old desktop. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't even have to be good. My first laptop was terrible. Had a big old line on the screen. Took probably more than 20 minutes to turn on, but no biggie. The second thing you need is a set of speakers. They could even be the laptop speakers. The whole point of this is that we're getting started, so you don't need some high-end $250 headphones. You could use some Skull Candy headphones, some in-ear headphones that you bought for $7 at Marshall's, or you could use laptop speakers. The third thing that you need is a DAW. A DAW is a digital audio workstation. It's really just a program that you use to record, produce, mix, and master your music. I'm using Ableton Live 10 Suite. This is my DAW of choice. You can use FL Studio, Cubase, Pro Tools. Whichever fits your workflow best is the best one for you. There's no right or wrong choice. There's no best one, and then I don't really think there's any worse one either, so we have that out of the way, so now we can get started with making the song and explaining how this program works. We're done with the music theory part. Now we're going to get into actually making the song. Something I want to say before we get into it is there's no right or wrong way to make a song. There's a lot of ways to do it. I'm going to start by explaining a little bit about the interface so you can understand what we're doing at least. This is Ableton Live 10 Suite. Here we have the tempo or the BPM of the song. So if I wanted to make a fast song, I would, drag this up. If I wanted to make a slower one, I would drag it down. It really depends on what you're trying to do. This is the metronome. I can test the tempo that I'm setting by turning on the metronome. So if I want to make it really slow. If I want to make it really fast, I can actually type in the number. Excellent. Over here, a little tap button. I can tap in, like, let's say I'm dealing with a sample or something, or I have a tempo in mind, but I don't really know what time it is. I can tap to this, and then I'll eventually get the tempo that I'm tapping. As we go over here, we have play, obviously. We have stop, and we have record. If nothing here is armed to record, like you'll see these light up red when you press them, then nothing will be recorded because, nothing is armed for recording. So if I were to record vocals, I would, turn this on, press record, and then sing or rap along to the song. Over here, we have, I'll explain what this is in a second. This is to enable playing notes with your computer keyboard. You can turn this on and off by left-clicking or pressing M on the keyboard. If I had a MIDI channel open right now, this is a MIDI channel right here. I'm going to explain what MIDI is in a second. And I had an instrument loaded up, like a grand piano. If this is enabled, I can play the instrument with my keyboard. Easy, right? This is available in most DAWs, but in this one, this is how you do it. Currently, I have a MIDI controller, so I can play things, and you're not gonna really see my mouse doing anything, but I have like a little digital piano next to my computer that is connected to the PC, and it's sending MIDI signal. Now, what MIDI is just data. MIDI is not sound. MIDI does nothing by itself. MIDI is merely data that you send to an instrument or something, a plugin, and the plugin will make a sound in reaction. So I have this MIDI channel with a grand piano loaded up from Ableton. Comes with the program. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click here in the playlist, and I'm going to open up this little MIDI window, just like that. And then once I'm inside, I'm gonna drop down some notes, right? Just random notes. I'm not going to think about this. This is just for an example. So you hear that, right? That is the MIDI signal sending information to the piano, and the piano is playing those notes accordingly. So if I were to drag this to a MIDI channel that doesn't have a sampled sound in it or an instrument, nothing would play. It's just data. It's a MIDI signal, no sound. So we know what MIDI is. Audio channels, I can just drop sounds directly into them. If I wanted to use a kick, I would just drop it in here. Over here, they have these little things. This is essentially, if I want to mute the channel, I can just press this. This is a solo button so that I only hear this channel instead of all the other ones. As I mentioned earlier, this is to arm it for recording. This is the volume measured in decibels. This is panning. If it says C, it means that it's centered. And if you move it all the way to the left, then your sound's gonna go all the way to the left in your ears. I'm gonna do it down here now. All the way to the right. Here we have sounds, which is essentially just a bunch of stock sounds that the program came in with. They're essentially just sampled instruments or, you know, some interesting synths that you can use. A lot of these are pretty damn usable right out of the box. Here we have drums that are a bunch of stock drum kits that come with the program. Instruments, which are, you know, pretty self-explanatory. They're instruments that come with the program. I can just open a random one and I'll be able to preview it. Audio effects. All right, so I'm gonna explain what a plugin is briefly. There's a lot of different types of plugins. To keep it brief, I'm gonna put them into two categories. There's mixing and mastering plugins. After the song is complete from the aspect of recording and production, like making the beat and the instrumentals and recording every individual element of it, you would move into mixing and mastering, which are intended to sort of help every element fit together more cohesively and make sense together in the sense of volume, frequencies, and panning. And then there's the plugins that pertain to effects. There's where you would find your flangers, your phasers, your reverbs, whatever. First, I'm gonna open up a instrument plugin in Ableton. I use this one often. It's called grandpiano.adg. Since I already have this MIDI channel that's been opened, I'm gonna double click Grand Piano. I'm gonna play it on my MIDI for a second. So this is an instrument plugin. And, you know, whenever I play any notes on the MIDI or on the computer keyboard, you're gonna hear them running through the plugin and coming out as piano sounds. And I'm gonna slap on an effect sound. First, I'm gonna play something with no effects on it, and then I'll play it with effects on, so you start, you know, noticing the difference between things. So first, the piano just completely dry. And now I'm going to add a reverb real quick. Just slap it on. And this is the same thing that I played earlier, but with reverb on it. I'm playing it in its stock settings, but I'm going to make this a little dry wet knob. I'm going to max it out. Dry essentially means the original clean signal. So if I was to say I want to hear this piano dry, it would be the first example we played. So if I turn this off, this is just the piano dry, no effects on it. And if I put it at wet 100%, it means that we're still hearing the piano signal, but it's being 100% affected by this reverb thing. So it's being 100% processed. You're not really hearing the raw sound anymore. You're hearing the piano being run through this plugin. And what comes out is essentially this sound that we're hearing. It sounds completely different, right? I'm going to play what I played earlier, but completely wet. So that's just an example of how much a single FX plugin can completely change your sound. I'm going to keep stacking another random effect on it. I'm going to open this flanger and I'm going to put it on. It's probably going to sound kind of terrible now, but I'm going to reduce the wetness so we get some of the original signal, so it's not just completely washed out. The first plugin is a reverb plugin, and the second plugin is a flanger plugin. So let's listen. Sounds pretty interesting, right? This is the difference that applying a single or, well, a bunch of plugins can make. When you're sitting down, you're making a song, you don't really want to have the entire song be kind of boring and static and just raw. You kind of want to start learning your way around plugins and effects and, you know, achieving a sound that's a little bit more unique. Obviously, you don't have to slap on plugins just because I'm saying this. If you want to make a song with exclusively dry sounds, by all means, if it slaps, it slaps. There's no rules here. But yeah, this is my just a little brief explanation on what plugins are. Beyond the plugins that your DAW comes with, by the way, there's a ridiculous amount of free plugins out there that you can find pertaining to literally everything. So if you're bored of the plugins that your DAW included, you can look around and find more interesting ones. So back to it. Max for Live, which is just kind of a sort of plugin format, if I'm not mistaken, that is specifically for Ableton. And plugins, this is just where you can dump a bunch of random plugins you've downloaded, essentially. I have a mess of plugins here. Clips is empty, don't know what Clips is. Samples is just a bunch of samples that, again, the program brings, a ridiculous amount. And now we're down to the user library and the packs. This is like the more important thing I think you should know. Let's say you just got started and you want to download a drum kit. I don't know. The program the DAW doesn't really have a stock drum kit that you like. Depends on what kind of music you're making. You're gonna want different sounds. So currently I'm using this one for the video. This is a free drum kit I downloaded called the Kit Plug Portal Drum Kit. If you want to add a drum kit, all you have to do is click on Add Folder, find the drum kit, and then click on it, and then press on Select Folder. I imagine it varies with Mac, but it's a pretty simple process. Just keep in mind where you have your folder, and then click on that folder, and it'll be inside the plugin. So let's just assume that we've done that process, and now we're in the program. So we know where all our sounds are. We know how most of this works. We know the audio channels. So now we're gonna actually get into the beat. No more boring stuff. So I'm gonna open 2 MIDI tracks and 2 audio channels like the program usually opens up. First, I usually like to start with a melody or with chords. I just usually like to start with the melodic part. A lot of people do the percussion, but I just like the melodic part. So I'm gonna use this plugin I like a lot. By the way, if you press Control F, it'll take you to all results. Like I'll be able to look for something. I'm looking for a plugin right now, a Rhodes plugin by I think the company's called Dead Duck or something. So I just write Duck, and I'll find anything with the name Duck in it in the program. So I have the piano here, and now I have it in my little MIDI channel, so now I can play it. And I already have a sort of some chords in mind. Something I want to mention from earlier is I was explaining how chord progressions work and whatever, and some basic music theory. It's important to note that music theory is not a set of rules. You don't have to strictly live by them. It's more of a set of guidelines, and once you learn how to break them, it's a lot better. For example, I had this chord progression in mind, and I don't really know the scale. They probably all belong to the same scale, but, you know, who cares? I don't really know it in this case. It doesn't necessarily need to sound like this for your first song. You could just make a simpler chord progression. Like, you know, you could go in C major and do a 2, 5, 1. It's no big deal. So the chord progression I did is kind of a weird one. It's something like that. So I'm going to lay it down now. I'm going to press, I have this armed for recording, so now I'm going to press record. Actually, important, I forgot to set the BPM. I want something like 105. So now I'm going to press record, and this is going to do a little count off. And then once the count off ends, I can start playing the notes, and it'll record them into the playlist. So let's go. We have this. This is what I just recorded. But I don't really like the way it looks right now and the way it's timed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control All, or just manually select them. I'm going to right click and I'm going to quantize. What quantize will do is it'll essentially slap them onto the grid that's already here, obviously relative to where they are. So you'll see that almost every single note got adjusted to where I wanted them to be, except this one. This one's a little bit out, and it's because it was a lot closer to this side than it was to this side. So that's something you want to keep in mind when you're adjusting to the grid, when you're quantizing. So I'm also going to press legato, so that instead of ending weirdly, like at these odd times, they're all going to end when the next one starts. So now let's hear it back. So now we have some chords, right? I kind of like the way they sound, so it's up to you where you go from here. You can kind of work on a melody, but I'm gonna start getting some drums. I usually like to keep it pretty simple. I'm gonna click on this and I'm gonna press Control L, and that's gonna loop it. So once it reaches the end of this loop, it'll just keep looping over and over and over again. This makes it a lot easier for me to work with it. So I'm gonna play it and I'm gonna go look through the drum kit I downloaded for this video. Okay, so this drum sounds kind of whack. Kind of want to find a better one. Something you want to keep in mind, this kind of falls within the category of mixing, so I'm not going to get too into that because that's not very beginner friendly, is I mentioned earlier that you can change volumes here. You want to make sure that when you're playing it back, this little thing down here, the master track, it doesn't go into the red. It's a bad sign. It means you're clipping. Your audio signal is distorting because it's way too loud. So if you see it clipping, you're gonna want to start kind of turning down elements until it stops clipping. I'm sorry. Usually, what I like to do, because I like to listen to this stuff pretty loud, is I like to keep the general volume from where I'm listening. I like to keep that volume up, and I like to keep this one a little more quiet. That way, I can listen to it loudly, but I don't have to deal with the master clipping. But don't listen to it too loud. You're gonna go deaf. All right, we got some kicks. We got some snares. Snares, all right, to say the least. I'm gonna get some hi-hats now. Okay, so we have kicks, we have snares, we have hi-hats. I could keep developing this from the percussion standpoint, but I kind of just want to slap an 808 on it already, so I like this one. So I'm going to open up a MIDI channel. Goddamn. Drag it into it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a tuner. Now, the purpose of using the tuner is to make sure that my 808 is actually in tune. So I'm going to press down on middle C on my keyboard now. You're going to see that it says E right here. I know that it's not tuned to C. That doesn't mean it's out of tune or something. It just means it's not tuned to the note I thought it was. So if you didn't pull up a tuner and you just randomly started playing on your keyboard, you would realize, and I would hope that you would notice, that you were playing the wrong notes every time you played. We know that this 808 in specific is tuned to E, and I want to tune it to C so that it's easier to play without having to think about adjusting for those for how many semitones off it is. We know that E is just about 4 semitones above from C, I think. 4 semitones up. So to get down to C, I'm going to transpose this 4 semitones down now. And so now when I press C on the keyboard, we get C. So now, there's a lot of ways to do this, but since I'm not really thinking about like what scale we're in and everything, I'm just going to kind of play something safe along with the chords. So I can kind of just play the bass notes. These are the bass notes of the chords. I don't think any of them, I haven't inverted any of them, so they're all in their root positions. So I'm going to play the bass notes now. So we have a bass line, which is just the same as the the chords. This is the bass notes of the chords. This is a pretty solid bass, I'd say, for a song. We want to kind of keep it simple. Nobody's out here making their first song with 9 beat switches and 4 key changes. So let me see where I can go with this. I can probably add an open hat of some sort. Let's see the open hats. Something to mention about panning that I mentioned earlier, that you do panning from here. I always pan my hi-hats to the right. Not necessary. If you think it sounds better to pan them to the left, go ahead and pan them to the left. What you don't want to think about is you don't want to have every single element of the track right smack down the middle. You want to have them sort of spaced out so they can breathe. The only things that I will always leave right down the middle are the kick and the snare. That's it. Oh, and the bass. Those 3 things. That's it. Everything else can be sort of panned in some direction. I like to put my hi-hats and open hats opposite to each other. So even if the drum loop's really simple and basic, it'll still feel like there's at least some stereo field going on, like some activity going on. What I'm going to do now is I have a solid sort of a interesting chord progression or whatever. I have a bass line, kicks, snares, hi-hats, some open hats. I'm going to work on structuring now, which is essentially I'm going to space this out so it feels like an actual full song and not just this section. So I'll strip away some elements. I might add some different elements to make things interesting. Okay, so a few things. I added a sort of intro. The intro essentially is the exact same chord progression, but this time it's alone. I added this thing called an EQ8. It's a plugin in Ableton. The purpose of an equalizer is to strip away or boost already existing frequencies. So what we're doing in this case with the equalizer is we're adding one in the beginning, and it's going to turn off once this part of the song comes in. So the equalizer is only on for this section. The name of this sort of thing is automation, where essentially I'm making it so that what I did right here is I press the A button, and now I can see this sort of red line that's over the MIDI. This little red line here, the purpose of it is to sort of control when the plugin is on or off, or when a certain parameter will be modified. You can attach this automation thing to anything, literally anything. But that, again, that's a little bit more advanced, so I'm just explaining the simple version. I had this little thing, this little EQ here. It makes the piano sound a lot more hollow. If I didn't have it like this, it would sound like this, you know, like usual. I've clicked here and I've set it to on, and then I've clicked here and I've set it to off. So from the beginning, it will be on, and then after 2 bars, it'll turn off, and then we'll be, you know, in the where we were earlier in the song, and it'll sound a lot fuller and whatever. So that's that. Another thing I did to make the intro more interesting is on the master track, I have this plugin called Glitch 2, and I have it twice. What I'm doing here is in the beginning, it sort of slides in from silence. It's called a tape stop. It goes like this. And so I only wanted that one to happen once in the very beginning. So that's what this instance of Glitch 2 is dedicated to. That's why it starts on, and then it's just off for the rest of the song. And then at the end of this section, you're going to see that this one turns on and off again. That's because before it comes into the body of the song or whatever, the hook or the chorus, it does this. Again, none of this is necessary. Glitch is a plugin that does not come with Ableton. It's a free plugin at least. And it's just things you do to make the song more interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and continue structuring this. All right, so the song is more or less done. It would just have to be mixed or whatever, make everything sound a bit cleaner together. Essentially, what we had in the beginning was just these 2 little parts, just the chords, you know, little kick, little snare, little hi-hats, little open hat. Now I'm gonna go over it a little bit. I explained the intro already. I added these snares before the hook comes in. Something else I added was what I did was I kept the chords, but I used a different instrument for the chords, and I made it really low and deep, and I added this plugin. I'm going to show you what it sounds like with and without the plugin. This is the plugin I used in the master track earlier to make the little intro that kind of smooths in and then ducks out as well. It's Glitch 2. I really like it. I use it to make this thing sort of have a sort of LFO feel to it, where it's like really swinging. That keeps it from being too boring because I'm already using the same chord progression. And then I added a bell after this entire chord progression repeats twice. And I've made sure that the bell is panned pretty far into the sides. And with the automation, I've made it so that the pan changes every 2 bell hits. I've specifically set up the panning settings so that every now and then when the bell hits, it'll immediately switch to the other side. This is a slightly advanced, but not really. You just kind of have to sit down and figure it out. I added these little perk sounds in the verses so it doesn't get boring. Right here is when I added after the bell thing is when the hook comes back in, and it's literally just the same chords as the beginning, but they're playing over nothing. And then they play with only the hi-hats, the snares, and the open hats. to sort of tease you before it comes back in, I'm going to actually move this. I'm going to add one more thing here. And then this thing the whole point of this was to show you really just how simple it is to make your first song. This isn't a slap banger. This isn't incredible, but I like it. This is just kind of a simple trap song. And the whole point of this is for you to understand. In this song, I've used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sounds. Literally just 9 sounds. Other songs, other more professional songs, will have a ridiculous amount of sounds, but sometimes simplicity is key. It's also worth noting that if you're starting out, and even if you've done this for a while, actually, some of your stuff's going to suck. And you can't let that get you down. You can't focus too much on the bad side of things. This beat, I don't think it's my best work, but it's not bad either. I enjoy it, and I enjoyed making it. Maybe if you're trying this out for the first time and you thought the beat was whack, or maybe the tutorial was whack, and maybe your first beat's going to be whack if you try it, don't worry about it. Like a wise man named Kenny Beats once said, don't overthink shit. Just go out there and make music and have fun doing it. That's this beat. I'm probably going to sort of mix it a little bit and then put it at the end of the video so you can hear what it sounds like finished and a bit more polished. And yeah, that's it. That is how to make your first beat. And that's it. I mean, it's easy to say that's it, although it was a pretty long video, but it wasn't that hard, right? It was a little bit easier than it seemed at the beginning, I imagine. I think it's really not as bad as it seems. I got into it. I tried to get into making music like 3 times, and I just kept getting thrown off by how complicated it seemed. But then, I kept going, and now I know what I'm doing to a degree. So, if you liked what you saw, if you would like to see more, or maybe other types of videos relating to music, or anything else, I guess, let me know. Like the video if you liked it. If you didn't like it, tell me you hate me in the comments and dislike it. It's completely fine by me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to making more similar videos. Maybe just instead of tutorial, just me recording like the majority of me making a beat, maybe sample based, maybe from scratch. It's whatever. If you saw this and you still think it's a little bit complicated, I am happy to answer any questions you might have. You can put them in the comments or send it to my email. I'll put that probably in the description or right here on screen. And yeah, that's it. I hope this inspired you to make your first song. I hope you understood what you saw, and I hope you enjoyed it. So yeah, have a nice day.